Hi, and welcome back to day 3 of our annual advocacy conference. For those of you who've been able to join us for the last couple of days, I hope you've found the content enriching and exciting. I've learned a lot, and that's always energizing for me. Again, we have just hundreds of people. I think nearly 900 people are joining us again today. And so again, while you might feel like you're just sitting in front of the screen having conversation with just a couple people, actually you're having a conversation with nearly 1,000 people. So thanks again for being a part of it. Yesterday was really exciting because we got to hear from Diane Baguette, who is a representative from the state of Colorado. I went to bed really hopeful around telemedicine. I loved what she had to say there, a lot of positive energy, and her amazing story about her stepfather and kind of that, I don't remember the justice that she talked about, and having the heart higher than the law as she was coming out of law school. So hopefully that carries you through the course of the next few days as you get to talk to various members of Congress and their staff. So right now I'd like to turn the microphone over to Dr. Neil Thacker, who you've met before, and Neil is going to talk about what to expect over the course of our next hour and a half together. Neil?
Thanks, Colony. So today's focus is going to be on another essential pillar of our effort to make ALS a livable disease, and that's optimizing current treatments and cure. And we're going to hear a message from Senator Mike Braun from Indiana, and we're going to have a case study focusing on the value of multidisciplinary care through clinics, helping to manage symptoms, treatments, decision-making, and reducing injuries. And also a housekeeping note, please be sure to take note of your questions as the session progresses, because we're going to cover a complex topic in lots of different ways. And at the end of the day, again, we're going to have a live Q&A panel. So, Colony?
Thanks, Neil. We got a lot of amazing questions yesterday. I know we didn't get to all of them, but we're going to try again today. So definitely make sure to take note of those. I do want to say thank you to our sponsors who have made these 3 days possible, as well as the coming days that you will be a participant of. They help us do whatever it takes, and I'm very grateful for their support. So I'd just like to thank our sponsors of Alexion, Amylyx, Biogen, Biohaven, Genentech, and the Per Mobile Foundation. And I'd also like to thank our exhibitor level sponsors. I hope you've had a chance to go see them. Apellis, Clean, Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma America, PRC, Saltillo, and Soleo Health. So again, thank you for all of your support for our work together. And I hope that everyone sees the value of bringing all of these individuals together for this conference as we advocate for a huge host of things on Capitol Hill. So now Neil is going to share with us some thoughts around part of our strategic plan and our efforts on optimizing current treatments and care. So Neil, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Colony. Can we go to the next slide, please, Adam? So to remind us of where we are, we have a focus of making ALS a livable disease by 2030. And that means until we can find a cure, we're really focused on helping people with ALS have longer lives, improve the quality of their life, and then help the people that they love, the people they work with, the people in their family, the people in their neighborhood, prevent them from getting ALS as well, perhaps from the same reasons why they got ALS. And there are 3 key things that we have to do to get there. We have to find new treatments and cures. We have to prevent or delay the harms associated with ALS. And then what we're going to be talking about in this session is to make the best of the treatments that we have, to really optimize the current treatments and care that we have to really make everything as effective as possible. So if you can go to the next slide, please. You may have heard this phrase of cocktail therapy or combination therapy. And people with ALS have not only ALS itself, but they have other health needs that sometimes are associated with ALS or may be related to other conditions that they had before. their ALS developed. And so part of the clinical challenge is to make all of those medical treatments work together in harmony and more effectively. And that's where we talk about this cocktail approach. It's not, a bunch of kids grabbing all the liquor they can and putting it into a bowl and turning it into a punch. It really is a cocktail. There's finesse involved, there's precision. And when you do it right, you get something that's much better than you would by all the ingredients individually. Part of this also, to improve state-of-the-art care, is about reducing the complications associated with ALS. And you might remember Jill Yursak's presentation yesterday, where she talked about some of the things that ALS causes in addition to motor neuron death, things like falls and pneumonia and infections and bed sores, things that end up sending people to the hospital, sending people to the emergency room. They certainly cause pain, they cause suffering, and they may also shorten life. We don't quite know that yet. That's part of the work that we need to do. And so if we can reduce those things, if we can focus on them, we have the opportunity to improve how people live with ALS, and then also hopefully to help them live longer. As you all know, ALS also not only impacts the person with the disease themselves, but also everyone who cares for them, their family members, their caregivers, and it can cause burdens on those families, financial stress, emotional stress, in some cases physical injuries. We know from other diseases like Alzheimer's that caregivers have higher rates of depression and physical injuries. We haven't done the work to document that in a formal way in the ALS space. We're just beginning to. And when we understand those things and we work on reducing those things, we can see also benefits for the whole family. And then finally, we all see the value of technology in helping people engage with the world in the way that they choose, carry on their responsibilities, and engage with their families in meaningful ways through technology. And sometimes it's things that help people communicate. Sometimes it's machines that help people move around, stay mobile, feed themselves, and also breathe. And that technology has a complex series of not only science behind it that we need to develop, but there's also payment issues and regulatory issues that we're also starting to address. And if we could enhance that technology, we can help people retain function longer. Can you go to the next slide, please? So there is a lot we know. And so one thing we know is a multidisciplinary care where all the experts on different aspects of ALS disease, different specialties working together, improves quality of life and extends life. And so this is one of the few evidence-based practices we have for ALS. And I have a link there to help people connect to an ALS certified center that's overseen by the association. We're also learning that more skill and experience with existing ALS drugs increases their effectiveness. And this is a little bit unusual, but we see it a lot in lots of different disease spaces. And so you might remember Dr. Jinsey Andrews from our first day of our meeting. She and some colleagues wrote a paper where they looked at how riluzole is working in the real world. And there's a link to that paper in that second URL. And when that clinical trial for riluzole was approved, it showed a survival benefit of 2 to 3 months. And what they did is they looked at a series of studies that looked at survival time for people who were on riluzole, and they saw a range of responses, but a majority of those papers showed a range of responses which was multiple times longer than what was seen in that initial clinical trial, 6 to 19 months. And how can that be? It's the same drug. The drug hasn't changed. We don't think the disease is changing. But what is changing is our skill at applying that drug in combination with all the other things that are related to ALS treatment. Sometimes it's the treatment of the disease itself. Sometimes it's symptom management. Sometimes it's avoidance of complications. And together, that gestalt, that precise cocktail approach does lead to better outcomes. As we find new treatments, like Radicava, for example, or some of the things that are on the pipeline that hopefully will get approved soon, part of the challenge will be to get those drugs to work in concert with the treatments we already have. And that's also how it feeds into a multidisciplinary care center, because those folks have the expertise, the experience to really make these things work together well. Part of our challenge at the association is to help them take that experience and write it up and share it with everyone. So the sum of all of this is that multidisciplinary care is really important. And one of the things we've been focusing on is expanding the number of clinics we have around the country. And we need to keep helping people get to multidisciplinary care. COVID has actually created a tremendous opportunity for us because it's helped us figure out how to deliver care remotely through telehealth. And so that's something that we're working on. And fortunately, it's not just the ALS community who's fighting to extend this telehealth benefits. We're working with people in other areas, and I'm feeling pretty confident about it. So we do know a lot. Things are getting better, but the changes are subtle and they're hard to see on an individual basis, and that's why we need to keep working. So let's go to the next slide, and let's talk more about how we can, what the good targets are for improvement. So again, I want to draw your memory back to Jill's presentation on ALS complications. And I know you've all gotten these calls or emails about people you care about with ALS who've gotten hurt or had to go to the hospital for an infection or had to go to the emergency room because they fell. I hate those emails. They really upset me. Not only are they just terrifying because someone's going to the hospital that we care about, but with ALS, you never know if they're going to really bounce back, if they're going to be the same when they come out. And so that's why preventing these complications is so important. And so that's something we can focus on over the next few years, start to work them down. And I think that's going to have a real impact on quality of life and length of life. The second thing that we need to work on, which is also extremely complex, was brought up a little bit by Representative DeJette when she was talking about the Cures 2.0 bill, which is in the drafting process. And we've been working with our team. We've already issued comments on several, I think, 2 different versions of that bill to really think about Medicare and how it works. And there's some strange little quirks of the regulatory bills, which are in the Medicare rules, which impact people with ALS. And so, for example, there's a rule that says they'll pay for assistive technology, but only for use in the home. And so that means they'll pay for a power wheelchair, but they won't pay for the ramp. And that's silly. It doesn't make sense in the ALS space, but we're a small part of a very large enterprise that Medicare looks for. And so that's one of the things that we're going to have to work on. And that's just one example. Every time they focus on a cost containment issue, like for access to ventilators or experts to support those services, the cost control issues are very real in Medicare, but they don't apply to people who have a progressive disease with tremendous need like ALS. And we end up being the collateral damage in that war on fraud and waste. And so that's also something we need to work on with Medicare. And I think Congresswoman DeJette is going to be really helpful to us as that process moves forward. And then, as I mentioned before, and as Kathleen talked about on the first day, permanent access to telehealth services is really important because it's our key to making access to multidisciplinary care feasible for far more Americans than can actually drive to the clinic on a periodic basis. It's also a way that we've been able to help people get into support groups, not necessarily medical or billable services. That's also really important to quality of life. And it's also a way to facilitate better access to clinical trials. So there's a lot of potential in these 3 areas, and we're going to be working on them for the next few years. I want to go to the next slide, please. So I talked about clinical trials, and I talked about that in the first day too, because participating in research is really going to help us change our understanding of this disease, help us find new treatments, dramatically change the trajectory of ALS. The clinical trials themselves are only one way that you can participate in research. Another way that you can participate in drug development process and the policy development process is by signing up for non-interventional survey programs like ALS Focus, where you can be part of a platform of surveys and get multiple surveys across the year. These surveys help us document to the FDA about what's important and what the risk-benefit trade-offs people are willing to face, help document to Congress about people's access to care and challenges in research benefits and Medicare benefit design. We have a link here to participate in this. I would ask that you do that. We have a survey right now on telehealth needs. That's obviously very important to us, and we'll have other surveys which are very policy relevant coming throughout the year. So if we can go then to the public policy priorities here. If we really want to optimize current treatments and care, we have to think about shifting our research priorities, not into just developing new treatments, but to making the treatments we have now work together better, to harness the wisdom out of our clinics and our ALS specialists so it gets shared with everyone and distributed more broadly. And not only think about the treatment of the disease itself, but all the things that go along with that disease. To reduce those things, we know to an extent how to prevent falls. We know to an extent how to prevent pneumonias. And so we have to do those things because those things we can do. But that means we do have to get people to clinic. And that's where telehealth becomes really important, that we protect the benefits that we have, for including things like access to medications and durable medical equipment. And we have to keep thinking about how to engage Medicare to make them more effective for us. We also work with the VA to help benefits for people with ALS and their family members and their caregivers as well. And the VA, as you know, provides a very high quality of benefits and coverage. And it provides a great case study for us to explain to the rest of the country of how things can be. So if we keep moving the VA forward, I think we're thinking that we can provide better evidence to move other areas of ALS treatment forward as well. So that's the concept of what we mean by optimizing treatments and care. And so having said that, I want to turn things back to Colleen. I think we're going to have a little bit of discussion about these ideas because it's not something we've really been focusing on before.
Thanks, Neil. I thought it was really interesting kind of how you pulled all of that out. So in full disclosure to everyone, we were going to have someone, Bill Martin, who is a person living with ALS and also a member of the Rocky Mountain Board of Directors, join us. Unfortunately, Bill's technology, you know how technology is these days, so it's just not working right now. But I think it's one of the things that Bill wanted to talk about was the multidisciplinary centers, right? And the importance that they bring and how they can really impact a person's life. And so, Neil, I noticed on one of your slides, you talked a little bit about it, and we talked about how multidisciplinary centers can actually extend people's lives. And before the Ice Bucket Challenge happened, the ALS Association was able to invest and had 46 multidisciplinary centers. We've more than doubled that now, and so that we're over. I think we're at 96 or something of that sort, 94 maybe. And that shows a commitment, certainly from us, thinking that this is a really important investment. And so, Neil, I was thinking, since Bill can't be with us, and we certainly can't replace him, but maybe we could kind of extrapolate a little bit as to why we decided this was a really important area for us to focus in, especially in those first 5 years after the Ice Bucket Challenge. So why don't I toss it to you, and you and I can just kind of chat about it a little bit. I have a couple other thoughts too.
Yeah, that's a great question. Good. There's two elements there. So one is, it is an evidence-based practice that has been proven to increase length of life and quality of life. not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. And so that's really important that we provide the best evidence that we have. And second, these treatment centers are a gateway into the whole world of cutting edge ALS technology and ALS treatments. And so, for example, many of these sites serve as sites for clinical trials. And so if you want to participate in clinical research, and we need people to, so we can really figure this out and get the cures that we need, these centers are the nexus for this. And so not only at the same time were we investing in these clinics, but we were investing in clinical trial centers, consortia, that was helping expand the number of clinical trials and the number of sites around the country. And that's been really helpful in getting our whole research enterprise moving even faster. And then, of course, the other part is this idea of cutting edge care. And we had a wonderful set of discussions from some of our clinical experts at these centers. They were talking about things like shoulder pain and respiratory health and all the things that come with ALS that a neurologist is just not going to learn. They do need to be working with experts from other disciplines to helping to figure out those things. So ALS is really a much more manageable condition. And it's interesting what's happening to Bill now. He's having technology problems, and so he can't speak at a meeting like this. But imagine if he had a doctor's appointment, and how terrible that is, because there's bandwidth issues and access to the internet issues all throughout the country. So that's also something that we're working on. That hasn't been a focus today, but it is turning into the fact that the internet itself is becoming a necessary part of our healthcare delivery system. And so we are paying attention to that. It is really important, and we're just at the beginning of that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You know, you said a couple of things in there that kind of pinged my brain off here. One is that you said something about Europe and how the internet and, you know, this multidisciplinary care piece is not just something here in the States that we see that's evidence-based and that supports it. I was literally just a few hours ago hosting an international call and a webinar around telehealth, telemedicine, and what we've seen over these last 18 months or so from the pandemic and what we've learned. And when I think about that in these centers and kind of what you just alluded to, which is the digital divide that does exist. I know the association, we have spent a lot of time talking about this, and this is maybe one of the opportunities of the pandemic, which is highlighting that there is a digital divide and the importance of that in accessing health and treatment. And so we've started some serious initiatives around this effort. I guess my question to you is, when you think about expanding that access or optimizing the care the way that you were just talking about, and really honing in and focusing on that digital divide, how do you see some of the maybe the positive or negative unintended consequences around telehealth and telemedicine into the future that may or may not stick? That's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah, it's the right question though. I mean, it's really important. There's so many weird little nuances of our health system that get blown up by telemedicine. And so the rules about where people are allowed to practice, where clinicians are allowed to practice, depends on their specialty, their discipline, depends on the state they're in, and depends on where their patient is. And telemedicine hasn't really worked until COVID, in part because during COVID, they just waived a lot of those rules and a lot of those complexities. And everyone just figured out ways to make it work. And it's been working pretty well. The other challenge is telemedicine tends to bill at a much lower rate than an in-person visit. And you think about when you go to your doctor's office, you're not only paying for your doctor's time, but you're paying for rent, you're paying for people to maintain that physical space, all these other things that they don't pay for in a telemedicine visit. And if we want to maintain these programs, keep them robust, make sure there's enough ALS specialists around, we have to make sure that they get paid in a way that their employers are going to feel like they can have them spend time on telemedicine visits. And so in COVID, when no one was coming into the doctor's office, people were willing to take a financial hit and work through telemedicine. And as people start coming back, They may not, and it may go away for market reasons in addition to policy reasons. And so we're having to figure out all of those things. It's a complex topic. It's bigger than ALS, and in that sense, we have a lot of allies that we're working with, and so that's why I'm feeling confident about it. But there's still challenges, and there's also, as I mentioned before, there's that opportunity to run clinical trials in different ways through telemedicine. The FDA trial sponsors are getting much more comfortable about that, and I think that's very hopeful.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we could talk about this forever, so but we won't. And I appreciate the little fireside chat we just had about it. I think the payer piece is really important. So thank you so much. So I now want to kind of pivot and turn our attention to a gentleman who I have come to love and adore, Mr. Tommy May. Tommy is a person living with ALS. Was diagnosed in 2005 and serves on the board of trustees at the ALS Association. He is also a retired the retired chairman of and CEO of Simmons First National Corporation. And Tommy is here to talk about the power of advocacy. And I will now turn the floor over to you, Tommy.
Okay. Thank you, Colleen, for that kind introduction, and welcome everybody. In a few moments, I am going to tell you about Senator Mike Braun, who is one of our ALS champions. But first, I want to talk with you about the power of advocacy. This has been a great conference, but now we need to take action. Advocacy is a team effort. When we put all of our individual efforts together, our power is magnified tremendously. Here are just a few ways that you and I, working together, have accomplished real results. Together, we've convinced Congress and the administration that first, ALS is a military service-connected disease. Second, that there should be absolutely no wait for people living with ALS who qualify for Social Security disability. Thirdly, funding for the Department of Defense ALS research should increase from $10 million to $40 million. And fourth, ALS funding at NIH should be boosted from $52 million in 2016 to $111 million in 2020. I'm telling you, together, we've really accomplished a lot. That is why we need you and everyone that you know to continue lobbying Congress and the administration, not just in June, but every month of the year and every year. Let's do whatever it takes to convince Congress to change laws and provide the funding needed to make ALS a livable disease by 2030. Let me now take a moment to tell you about Senator Mike Braun, a true champion. Senator Braun, a Republican from Indiana, was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2018. He spoke at last year's conference, but is unable to join us while he is traveling throughout the state of Indiana. However, he did provide us with his remarks via video. Senator Braun works closely with the association and our Indiana ALS chapter and co-chairs the ALS caucus. He is a member of the Powerful Appropriations Committee, where he has championed more funding for ALS research. He also introduced the Promising Pathway Act to provide earlier access to promising treatments. So let's listen to his remarks.
Hello, Sen Mike Braun here. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words on optimizing current treatments and care. I'd like to discuss my Promising Pathways Act. People with ALS urgently need effective new treatments. FDA must be fully funded, fully staffed, and provided the regulatory authority they need to be fast and effective and speed ALS trials and drug approvals. With no known cause or cure for ALS, innovative solutions are needed to accelerate development, approval, and access to effective new treatments for the unmet medical needs of people with ALS. While the FDA has the regulatory authority to accelerate drug approvals, the mechanisms do not provide access until after a drug is approved. With no treatments, people with ALS will accept the risk if it means hope for any benefit. I introduced the Promising Pathway Act to create a provisional approval mechanism for rolling time-limited approval of drugs that show substantial evidence of safety and relevant data establishing a positive therapeutic outcome. Provisionally approved drugs would be approved on the condition that the manufacturer would conduct post-market surveillance requirements to establish statistical significance of efficacy for full approval within a set amount of time. Provisional approval may provide rare disease patients like ALS with unmet medical need with earlier access to promising therapies that have not been determined safe, but where statistical significance of efficacy is still not sufficiently established for full approval. The FDA's decision regarding a new Alzheimer's drug gives me hope that the Promising Pathway Act's time has come to the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you both. So now we're going to take a little bit of break, but I just want to really thank Tommy, Neil, and of course the Senator for all of your remarks. I think the encouragement that we just got from the Senator shows that we're on the right path. So we will reconvene back here at 40 minutes past the hour. Right now, that would be 3:40 East Coast time. I think we're at 32 minutes past the hour. So take a little break, and we'll see you back real soon. Thank you.